welcome to another episode of the Fully Charged Show podcast, where today we're catching up with Seb Inglis-Jones, who is the co-founder and CEO of Maeving, an electric motorbike company based here in the UK. Now, if you've not heard of Maeving before, then go and take a look on Google Images, have a look at their beautiful bikes. They have the RM1 and the RM1S, both of which just need CBTs, so your compulsory basic training rather than a full motorbike license. They are truly beautiful, perhaps really well known for their retro-futuristic design. And in this episode, we're going to get into the details of Maeving, how this startup came to be, what are some of their challenges in terms of creating electric motorbikes here in the UK, and how can we get more people onto two-wheeled electric mobility. Now, one thing that we did mention is price fairly early on in the podcast. And what I didn't mention is that actually you can lease these bikes for less than the cost of a monthly Oyster card. So that can make them super, super compelling. So all of that is coming. But first, a very quick advert break. We've teamed up with Duracell Energy to celebrate their brilliant ecosystem of home energy products and their Platinum Homeowner offer by giving away a Duracell Bunny. To win, simply watch to the end and answer a question about Fully Charged. Seb, thank you so much for joining us on the podcast on this really rather lovely Thursday morning. There will be so many people listening who will be absolutely familiar with who Maeving is. They will have either seen you at one of our live shows or seen the amazing episode that Jack did in the summer last year. But perhaps for those who aren't familiar, could you give us the elevator pitch?
So Maeving is Britain's first, and I'm glad to say at the moment, best-selling electric motorcycle manufacturer. We started the business not that long ago, about 2018. And the thing that really defines all the products that we've made is that we champion removable batteries. So the idea that despite it being a kind of fully fledged EV, you can take the battery out of the vehicle and charge it at any standard socket, which completely overcomes this whole sort of challenge of charging infrastructure being a barrier to electric adoption. So that's one of the key tenets. And then the other thing is leaning into the rich heritage that the UK has in the world of British motorcycling. We're not really known for that much these days anymore as a country in terms of manufacturing, but motorcycle design still remains one of the things. And so our bikes, I think, reflect the kind of best eras of British motorcycle design.
Sorry.
I was just going to say, and also, quite a few members of the team have kind of cut their teeth in some of the great British brands.
That's something I definitely want to touch on in this interview because your team is really, really quite extraordinary, and that's been an incredibly deliberate choice. So we will get into that. I want to just touch also on those removable batteries because, there are various solutions out there with removable batteries. But what's really stunning about the Maeving ones is that they're very beautiful. You wouldn't mind having them in the corner of your living room, say, charging away.
Well, I think that was sort of part and parcel of this idea of trying to introduce a culture where people are, just as you would charge your phone and your laptop at your desk at work or wherever, or even in a coffee shop, you do the same with your battery. So this has really been pioneered by the Chinese, actually. I mean, now China is such a big player in the world of EV, and everyone knows that. But back in the day when we started the business, China wasn't really talked about in the West. It was mainly Norway, which had just gone past, I think, 50% electric adoption, and Germany had pretty big adoption rates. But China was nowhere to be seen. But actually, in the two-wheeled space, 80% electric adoption, and everyone got used to this idea of having removable battery bikes, essentially because the Chinese government sort of outlawed petrol almost overnight in order to get rid of the issues with the really bad air pollution they were having in cities. So this whole movement had to start without really any charging infrastructure. And so removable batteries were the natural solution to that. And now, you go into a coffee shop or you go into someone's apartment in Shanghai and they've got their battery on the table charging away. So why not make it beautiful?
Yeah, why not make it beautiful? And also, even from a weight perspective, they're about 10 kilos. Is that right?
So, actually 12 for the RM1 and then for about 15 for the RM1S. The RM1S being obviously, higher top speed and about twice the acceleration of the RM1. So, and the RM1S, you can obviously charge the bike directly as well. So it kind of depends whether you live on the outskirts of the city and you've got a garage and you can just plug it in, or whether, like me, you live in an apartment in London and it's a relief to know that you can just take it out, and charge it.
Yeah. So two flagship products at the moment, the RM1 and the RM1S. You've mentioned a couple of the key differences between them, but could you sort of spell that out even more clearly for our audience?
Yeah, absolutely. So they're all, I mean, they both share the same lineage in terms of design. So they're both, as I said, quite kind of heritage inspired. For anyone who's familiar with the cafe racer era, the kind of 50s, 60s, that's where they both hark back to in terms of their design language. The RM1 is kind of built specifically with new riders and purely city riding in mind. So top speed of 45 miles per hour, 80 miles of range. It's a little bit lighter. It's a bit sort of more relaxed off the line. And there are plenty of people who live, in London, and for whom that bike just makes complete sense. It's also a little bit more affordable. It starts at £5,000. The RM1S is for, I guess it's been designed for people whose journeys might take them outside the city centre, who need to, spend brief times on motorways and A roads, because that's got a 70 mile per hour top speed. I'd also say, I guess, for the bikers among us, I've grown up loving bikes and cars, and the RM1S for me is, just in terms of speed and performance, is the one to go for. And I think genuinely for riding it around town, I would say, bear in mind that I do still ride the occasional petrol bike, I would say the RM1S is the best city bike you can get, because it's automatic, it's got like bicycle brakes, it's just super easy to ride. You're not constantly kind of changing up and down gears, between traffic. So yeah, it's good.
And critically, so I joined the shoot that Jack and the team did last year, and you just feel so cool. And people stop and ask you questions about them because it's such a beautiful design. I think you said retro futuristic there. And so people stop and they're curious and they want to know more. And, there are many people for whom outside of London, you quickly get into those areas where you do need to go above 50, 60 miles per hour, and then you can have a bit more confidence with the RM1S for sure.
I'm glad you said it. I think people still, even though actually in some ways motorcycling has it's become quite niche, in this country and in a lot of European countries as well. Not so much Southern Europe where it's more popular, but we can talk about that, about how I think it's seeing a bit of a revival. But people still, they just love the look of motorbikes, and particularly kind of old school motorbikes. And so I think the bike is beautiful in its own right, but the fact that it's also kind of quiet and it has this slightly different aura about it, it's obviously the acceleration is quite good. I think people are just really intrigued and sort of confused when they're working out slowly that it is electric and it is something new. So I think you do tend to get quite a lot of attention on it.
Now, one of the things that came up on our video was the price. And I think whenever we talk about electric vehicles in any capacity, be them sort of two-wheelers or traditional cars, the question of price comes up, because we know that presently there are some instances where we are at price parity, definitely at price parity from a running cost perspective, if you look at the overall total cost of ownership, but that initial purchase price is a little bit higher. So I wonder if you could sort of share how the RM1 and the RM1S compare to, say, their internal combustion engine counterparts. And do they ultimately end up being something that is cheaper to own versus one of those internal combustion engine?
Sure. Well, actually, I think the first thing I'd say is that the reason that our bikes are a little bit more expensive is more to do with the fact that they're built in the factory that I'm in currently in the UK. So all of our bikes are hand built in Britain, and the components that we use are incredibly high quality. So we've decided to engage with a supply chain that is quite elevated versus some of our competitors. So I think it's just worth saying, actually, that's really where the price piece comes in. And I like to think, based on the fact that we are outselling all of those cheaper Chinese players, but also the likes of Kawasaki and BMW, that people are recognizing that quality and the role that design plays and the performance as well. So I think it's important to get that said first, because there are actually electric scooters and motorbikes you can buy in this country that are as affordable as the most affordable 125cc comparable petrol scooters and bikes. So actually there is not a huge or any green premium for people who are just purely looking to get the most affordable product. So having said that, if we take something, I think the most popular bike, comparable bike in this country at the moment is the Honda PCX 125. This is there's a scooter, there's a motorcycle variant, and that is about £3,500 versus our £5,000 RM1. So there is a premium that you pay in the first instance, but if you look at it over the course of 5 years, it's actually only, I think it's 18%, or no, it's 14% more expensive for the RM1. So that's taking into account road tax, insurance, petrol use for the average UK commuter. So actually it is, the cost of ownership over the course of 4 years, it's pretty similar. And so I think the fact that we've managed to make a bike that is built in the UK that looks as it does, and actually, once you've ridden it for a few years, is virtually the same price as the most affordable, most popular 125cc bike is pretty impressive.
That is extremely impressive. And actually, when I've spoken to various engineering friends, we've been talking about the Maeving, I had one engineering friend who was like, okay, I need you to find out how on earth they have achieved that quality at the price point, because there's things like really, really beautiful machined parts that just have such a high quality feel. I mean, your suppliers are all extremely well-known suppliers, which is quite rare for a startup, because typically you don't have that kind of leverage to be able to command those good prices from those enormous tier one suppliers. But I know how you've structured your team and how you've chosen to be in Coventry, sort of the heartland of motorcycling in the UK. That's all kind of enabled some of those things.
Completely. It's entirely down to the team. So I think when we started the business, we felt very strongly the only bikes really that were in the market were these Chinese imports, and a lot of these bikes are absolutely fantastic at what they've been designed to do. They're built for a populace that are much more price sensitive, a domestic market that has where you can buy bikes between $400 and $1,500. And naturally, there's a bit of a cost-saving exercise that goes into the quality around that, but that's sufficient for that market. So we, by comparison, wanted to really dig into the quality and to focus on making products that people were really proud to own and had that kind of metalwork that you were talking about earlier, stitched seats, all that kind of stuff. So we decided as a company that we were only going to hire the most people who were top of their game. So our first hire was Triumph's head of product, a guy called Graham Gilbert. The key person for this, kind of conversation is our head of procurement, who's a guy called Neville Thomas, who was head of procurement at Triumph and Norton, but also Polestar, London Electric Vehicle Company, all the sort of big EV players. And so it's entirely through him that we were able to attract suppliers like Bosch, for example, who just don't work with startups, in young companies as we were back then. And so it was entirely based on their relationship that we were able to essentially, purchase relatively small batches of parts from companies that usually only deal in the tens or hundreds of thousands. And I think the fact that it was, the team, the design, that we were one of the few Western players, so I think they were also taking a bit of an interest in how that market was developing. And so I think, that's how we've managed to get the quality. That's how we managed to get the price. Also, that's how we managed to fend off the challenges of COVID as well, because most businesses that were kind of forged in the fires of COVID did not do so well out of the supply crisis off the back of it. Entirely down to the caliber of the team.
And I imagine, so for those who are listening, not watching, Seb is not in his 50s. You are early 30s? I don't need to ask that question. 34, which is horrifying, because I remember when I first met you, I think it would have been back in maybe 2021. I was like, oh my God, we're similar age and you've started a company and I have not started a company. But I suspect many investors, when you first had those initial conversations, maybe that might have been a bit of a challenge to convince them that you were someone they should back. I imagine they also had a perception that your company was going to be made up of 21-year-olds sitting on beanbags.
Yeah.
Was that the case?
So I think, it's almost one of the advantages of being young, and the fact that my co-founder Will and I had absolutely no history and no technical skills, no engineering skills, is that we just instantly had to lean on very experienced people. And so right from the outset, the plan was, as I said, to hire a team that really punches above its weight, essentially to sort of take a siloed product team from within a really established, one of the great motorcycle manufacturers, and recreate that on a single product in the first instance in our team. And we've also surrounded ourselves in terms of investors and advisors and our board with incredibly experienced people who more than account for our the follies of youth, and who as I said, we just have to rely on them entirely because of our particular skill sets and how much they diverge from that technical skill set.
Mm.
I think in many ways, some of the companies that have struggled in the EV space have been the ones where it's been a kind of a technical founder, who's been an excellent engineer, but maybe not been approaching the whole venture from a commercial perspective.
That's very diplomatically phrased, I think, there. But it is fascinating that, a startup of any nature is really, really challenging. And that core team of experts, of people that you trust so implicitly, is absolutely essential to best set something up for its success. Now, one of the things that's really fascinating to me is that, I would say I'm not a typical person in the biker community, probably making lots of assumptions there. But I
No,
looked at the Maeving when I first, stumbled across it and thought that is amazing. This is the kind of bike that allows me to have that Jennifer Coolidge moment, sort of riding around Italy, feeling extremely, extremely glamorous. But how has it been received by the broader and more stereotypical biker community?
Well, yeah, it's interesting you say that because I think pretty unashamedly, built the company around the idea that we wanted to attract the new rider, the kind of new generation of riders, partly because, if we're honest, the motorcycle community in the West has been slightly dying out. The average age for a motorcyclist in 2024 was 57.
Wow.
It's almost entirely male. It's a lot of people who are very, very wedded to, naturally to this incredible heritage of motorcycling, which, involves petrol engines, vibrations, noise, the kind of the oil rag as you clean the bike, and all of that kind of stuff, which I've completely bought into, in the past. And so we thought, right, we've got to focus on the new rider and people who are not wedded to that sort of lineage. But the surprise for us when we came to the market, when we first went to Motorcycle Live, which is the UK's biggest motorcycle show, and launched our first bike, having just literally, kind of got it on the road for the first time, was that we got a really positive reception from the motorcycle community. And I think that is down to the fact that we have chosen to build our bikes in the UK, our factories in Coventry, that the design is very Anglo-centric, but also the fact that we made it clear from the start that we're not here to replace, your big adventure bikes, your sports bikes. We don't think electric is quite there yet. We don't think that's the sweet spot. Where we think it makes complete sense is in the low power kind of commuting space in cities in particular. And so I think that much softer message of we're not here to kind of tread on your toes and take away your favorite bikes. We're here to kind of supplement the bike market with something that we think makes complete sense within its context. And I think that was a really positive message.
Wow, because I think that ability to recognize that you can't be all things to all people actually avoids pissing people off, I suppose, in a funny kind of way.
Yeah, exactly. And I think too often, EV players have tried to tell people that their love of noise and all of the rest of it is sort of illegitimate, and it's not. Completely understandable. It's just that there are also benefits to electric. Once you might miss the horror, the tech that I'm sure neighbours and people in the countryside don't miss the kind of sound of Ducatis racing down the road. But you might miss that, but then you might begin to appreciate the silence, the peace, the kind of tranquility, the meditative element of riding. You might start focusing on the environment around you. You might notice as you turn your bike on at 5 a.m. to, in the early hours, that you're not pissing off your neighbours. There's lots of stuff there, even aside from the positive effects on the environment and the rest of it. So I just think you've got to be real about the benefits and also accept that there will be people who will just still be in awe of petrol engines and have a love for all the kind of heritage bikes and cars, as I do.
That, I feel, is the humility that we need in the electrification discussion generally, because cars and any sort of mobility is weird, because on the one hand, they represent a very practical thing that you need to get from A to B. On the other hand, they are so imbued with emotion and they evoke loads of emotion, and perhaps even more so when it comes to motorbikes as well. And I feel very certain that I might have told you this story before, but I don't think I really understood why people were so obsessed with motorbikes who are in the riding community until I was riding around the Cotswolds. The sun was shining. It was the roads were really, really quiet, And I felt, this is the closest I have ever felt to flying. This
Yeah.
is unbelievable. And I thought, I'm convinced, I'm totally convinced. And then I looked at my speedometer and I was going 23 miles an hour. I was like, little way to go there, but my mum would at least be proud that I'm
Yeah,
not
yeah.
racing around.
It,
But that feel of, okay, we know that we can't be all things to all people, has also, it seems, really, really informed your scaling strategy, because you mentioned to me a few months ago that actually you don't even look country by country. It's much more localized than that, perhaps even city by city. So walk us through that logic. And is that there to try and identify those really, really core customers for whom the Maeving products will really resonate?
I will absolutely answer that question. I've just got to respond to the gliding thing, just because we've recently we've been lucky to attract a few kind of celebrity riders who've fallen in love with our bikes and got them, and two of those recently we've actually done short films with. One of whom is Ashley Walters, who's in adolescence and top boy and is quite a man at the moment, GQ Man of the Year. The other was a celebrity chef called Tom Brown that we just put a video out a few days ago, and it's been we've learned so much from them about what they enjoy about the bikes. Both of them work in very, very hectic worlds. One in acting, Ashley Walters, like super, man of the moment, but is actually quite an introvert and very much like a family man, lives like on the East Coast, to sort of get away from the hectic world. And then Tom again works like in a kitchen, late night, like just absolutely
Loud, yeah.
frenetic, yeah. And both of them have found that when they put on their helmet at the end of the day, like, they're not recognized and they're just gliding along in silence. And Ashley referred to it as flying. He said it's like skydiving, this moment where that you sort of jump out the plane and there's this, and then suddenly you're just at peace. And that's exactly what they like about the experience of riding an electric bike in particular versus petrol. And, as I said, we're completely learning from them. That neither of them had owned a motorbike before. Or had any experience. So that really, really resonates with me. So the sort of the city by city piece is actually, it's more to do with the fact that we're basically the first direct to consumer manufacturer. So we deliver and service all our bikes ourselves. And so a world in which you do that, you can't, it's very flippant to just go, right, we're going to launch across the whole of the US, for example. You're basically dealing with a continent of countries, of individual states there. And so we think about cities because we think about how far our vans can travel to, give good service, good delivery times. And so it's much more of a kind of, sort of slowly. So we're now across the whole of the UK, and France and Germany, but in the US, it's just like the tri-state region and Los Angeles and the West Coast, California, because it's just too big a kind of place to conquer all in one. So yeah, it's much more to do with that. Naturally, we gravitate towards cities because there's higher population density, but also because that's where our bikes make the most sense. So, I can't remember what the figure is. Last time I looked, about 35% of our sales were in London, in the UK. So,
Wow.
Just makes sense.
What I have to ask you, you've obviously been on this journey for a number of years. You founded this company. What does it feel like when you see someone random on one of your bikes?
Best feeling in the world. And it was one of the, I said, my founder and I, ages ago, we said that one of the best feelings that we were looking forward to was when we were, at the lights on a bike and then someone else pulls up on one of our bikes next to us and they don't know who we are, obviously. And we said the minute that happens, we must just drop everything, go and get a bottle of champagne and celebrate. And even now today, particularly when I'm actually driving, I commute from Coventry to the factory because I'm based in London, and occasionally our bikes will just overtake us, like one or two, and I still get a thrill every time I see them, even though there are a lot more of them about now. So it's very satisfying. It's also really satisfying actually every day. Our office kind of overlooks the factory floor, so just seeing bikes coming off the line, it's just, if you love cars and bikes, seeing them being kind of built, from scratch is magical.
It is magical. And I remember, I was an automotive engineer for quite a short period of time. And one of the things I worked on, and actually I worked on it over a summer internship, and it was called an air curtain. And basically it's like a tunnel that directs air around the front corner of a vehicle. with the intention that ideally it reduces drag. But every time I saw a corner of a car with an air curtain, I thought, I was there once. And seeing that physical thing and having that tangible connection to your work is unrivaled as a feeling. And I think that's the beauty of engineering and manufacturing here in the UK, getting to see your stuff out and about.
It absolutely is. I mean, sometimes it can be a bit of a curse. You really start to hang on the feedback of your customers. You just completely of its own volition, a kind of Maeving owners club, formed on Facebook, and sort of grew quite big, and just seeing people's comments. Mainly you get good posts with people just sharing photos of their journeys and their bikes as they have a cup of coffee somewhere. But in the early days, of people would say, oh, not so sure about this, or why don't maybe create more story, or whatever it might be. You become quite sort of fastidious about about sort of what you can do to improve, to always improve the product, I guess. So, you can't have one without the other.
Now, you alluded to this slightly earlier on, but the perception of biking in the UK is slowly changing. But if you look in other countries across Europe, certainly if you look in Southeast Asia in particular, biking is totally different. There are way more bikes on the road than there are cars, for example.
Yeah.
Do you think that the UK can ever get to that sort of density of bikes? Because at the end of the day, it would totally reduce the traffic on the road. It would reduce the amount of space taken up by cars. But we are somewhat cursed by unpredictable weather.
We are, although there's always that great stat about how the UK buys more, convertible sports cars per capita than anywhere else in the world. So we're clearly, I don't know, we're more optimistic than we give ourselves credit for. I think so. Look, the main reason why people predominantly buy bikes in Southeast Asia and China, it's the most popular form of transport, is because of the price. It's a much more attainable form of transport, and actually bikes are super capable. I mean, most people in these countries are riding around on low capacity bikes, but high capacity bikes, you can do absolutely everything other than obviously transport a family around. But so you sort of understand why those countries have more bikers per capita. But I do think people are waking up to the value of two wheels generally. So the EV revolution has brought e-bikes, it's brought electric push scooters, and we see electric scooters and electric motorbikes as the natural and more capable step up from those. And there's now a completely new customer who's never engaged with the world of the sort of niche world of and quite macho world of motorcycling before, is looking at this space as a practical solution. You've also got to remember that the average commute in the UK is 6.7 miles. The vast majority of trips are done solo. Traffic has become worse. Public transport's become less reliable. It's become slower. We got a third-party study that identified that our bikes produce less carbon per mile per capita than even the London Underground. So
wow,
it is faster. It is more affordable. Our bikes are cheaper by far on a monthly basis than an Oyster card, for example. It's greener. I just think you need to get people test riding for the first time. And I just guarantee that you won't go back, because you can reliably get across London, in the whole of London, in like 20, 30 minutes on a bike, in a way that you just cannot with any other form of transport. And look, it does rain in this country. It does get cold. You can put on a jacket. If you're doing relatively short distances, it is not the end of the world. And this is why you see that people who ride in urban areas tend to ride all year round, whereas people who ride recreationally in the countryside, not so much, which is completely understandable. So I think you can see more people on bikes. You can see a new customer who's come up from a sort of e-bike or a push scooter and just wants a bit more capability. And absolutely, there are benefits in terms of pollution, congestion. You can fit like 10 motorbikes in a car parking space. Even big. This whole sort of EV SUV revolution is not great. People are getting cars that are much bigger than they need to, that require considerably more resources and raw components than bikes do. So, but look, the most important message that I would get across to anyone is the fact that it's fun. Commuting is a cursed word. People do not enjoy being sort of shoved into the armpit of a stranger on a train or sitting in minus traffic in a car. And by contrast, and this was the big surprise to me when I got my first bike, was the fact that every single morning and evening it was a joy to commute, and I'd look forward to it as well.
Mm.
And I think that I love cars as well. I love driving so much, but I think riding is the next level in terms of enjoyment. I would really, I don't know anyone who rides a bike or a scooter and motorbike or a scooter and doesn't still find it an event, essentially,
Yeah.
and hop on it.
That fun is so important. And when you're talking about Ashley Walters and Tom Brown, and they describe that feeling of flying, you've also got that feeling of peace, and it's quite a mindful thing because you absolutely cannot be doing anything else whilst
Yeah,
riding a
it's
motorbike.
hugely mindful. It's very sort of differentiating from the car. When I'm in my car going, which I love, to and from Coventry, and I'm listening to a podcast, and I've got a heated seat, and and I'm eating, and I'm sort of drinking, whatever it is. You're in your sort of your cocoon of comfort.
Mm.
And on a bike, obviously you're focusing on the road much more as well. Much more conscientious. You've got none of that. You've got the wind. You've got the temperature. You've got the feel. It's you're left very much in your thoughts and just thinking about the kind of sensation of riding. And that is a much more meditative. I think meditative is the right word, but also calming experience. If you've got a 20-minute commute between the office and home, and you left work angry, by the time you get home, you won't be, because you've been kind of just focusing and in a very singular way for that 20 minutes. And that's not the case in a car. In a car, you're probably on the phone, having a call with your friend about how crap the day was.
Oh, yeah. And then also, if you get stuck in traffic, you're then thinking about all the things that you should be doing in that time, and you'd factored being home 15 minutes ago. Yeah,
Precisely. It's not. Yeah, exactly.
it's not a fun thing. But beyond the fun, you've described some really compelling facts there. So I just want to repeat them back to you. There's less carbon per mile than traveling on the underground.
Yeah.
Cheaper than an Oyster card if you were using the underground to commute every day. 10 motorbikes in one parking space. These are ridiculous, incredibly compelling reasons for us to encourage more motorbiking. But do you feel adequately supported by, say, the UK government or from various policies to encourage uptake? Is there anything that you would like to see in addition to what currently exists?
It's a good question. I mean, one of the big blows to us when we entered the market was, I think it was about a year in, the government reduced the plug-in grant from £1,500 to £500. So right away we lost, £1,000 on every bike we sold, essentially. And so we had to put the prices up, which was a blow to customers. We eventually then put them down as we sort of, got economies of scale in the company. But yes, is the the long and short of it. There are countries where the subsidies for EV purchases are much, much higher. Our European peers get much better subsidies in France and Germany. There are countries like the US where the governments are pouring huge amounts of investment into manufacturing operations to encourage companies to build their products in the US. And there's none of that in the UK. So you would have heard of the IRA funding in the US, where essentially the government was pitching to us to come and set up in a factory in the US with all of the expenses paid and a percentage of our cost of goods for the next 10 years. I mean, if we were in a more mature state at the time, I think it would have been very hard to ignore that offer. And there's just none of that in the UK. And obviously we're in a much tougher economic environment over here in terms of the cost of our debt, in terms of our borrowing, all that kind of stuff. And the effects of COVID and so on and so forth. But there's definitely not the same positive, optimistic, growth-orientated attitude towards the EV industry in this country. We're not currently championing cell manufacture, motor manufacture in the way that some countries are. Some countries are sort of setting a strategy around being the sort of economic center of these industries, and we're just not at all. We currently, about 65% of our bikes by volume are made in the UK. We would love, in theory, for 100% to be made in the UK and to champion, the best British motors, the best British battery cells, but we just don't make those things at the moment.
Yeah, and I've had various conversations over the past couple of weeks, and I found out that here in the UK, businesses, it's like the most expensive electricity for businesses, like pretty much globally. And there are many countries that if you're going to set up a manufacturing operation, you'll be given heavily subsidized electricity, or you'll be supported in your build costs or what have you, exactly as you were probably offered for the US. And I did an interview with the Climate Change Committee a couple of weeks ago, and I was like, oh, where do you really see the opportunity for the UK to really lead in the clean energy transition? And I was so disappointed when he said professional services.
Yeah.
I like, oh, it's so
Yeah.
boring. Like,
Yeah.
what about manufacturing and really, fostering those sorts of things? So certainly your wishes
Yeah,
are
the
that we hear
experience
it a lot.
is not unique. Yeah, it's actually it's worth saying we're lucky. Our factory's got just solar panels cover the entire roof, so we moved into it in that state. So we're very lucky in terms of our kind of subsidising there. Otherwise, it would be a complete nightmare. But it is worth saying that we have received an incredibly good welcome from kind of local government in the area. So in terms of help with finding factories, with recruiting in the first instance, with looking out for loans and grant funding, all that kind of stuff. So there's the willingness to support in the local area, and a lot of pride in Coventry and the West Midlands about the manufacturing kind of prowess. There's still a lot of engineering companies are headquartered here. It's just we don't make the stuff, and so I think there's the willingness, there's the appetite. There's just not ultimately the kind of focus from the top.
I forget his name, but there is a guy in Coventry City Council who's like head of innovation or something like that, and he is incredible. And he's not the only person that's really shaping some of the projects that the Coventry City Council support, and also West Midlands more generally. They have a big vision in that part of the world.
They do, but also it's justified insofar as you go down any of the streets here and they don't look like anything, but behind each gate they're amazing factories, designers, engineers, everything around. We're next to JLR. Polestar's just down the road where our old factory used to be. I mean, there's a huge amount of talent and prowess and knowledge, and I think we're not capitalizing that on the right way. And there are certain specific things like the battery, the gigafactories and stuff that do need to come in order to kind of onshore a lot of that expertise. But yeah, it's definitely not a focus, unfortunately, government.
So when you first went to Coventry, I have to ask you this: how intimidated were you by the ring road?
I'm not a thrill seeker. The one area in which I do not suffer from confidence is in driving and biking, as my 9 points on my license will attest to. So,
oh my God,
an absolute joy, not a challenge.
I have cried on that ring road many, many times. It is. I don't even understand how it works. It defies logic.
Yeah, I don't know how they think that the car merging isn't going to eventually enter some sort of crash, but there we go.
Yeah, I mean, for anyone who can master it, I salute you. Okay, we are coming towards the end of this podcast, and I wonder. I shouldn't even ask you this question because I know you're not going to be able to tell me very much. But what's in store for the next 5 years of Maeving?
Yes, it's a good question. We do tend to like to be funny, but look, I think just in general terms, our goal is to, we don't want to be a niche British manufacturer. Our desire and our kind of mission as a company is to get as many people onto electric transport as possible. We think that the key way to do that is through two wheels, and so it won't surprise you to hear that we are looking to expand the use cases for our bikes and to cater for all bikers and all kind of two-wheel transport out there. I think the key thing for us is that we will only ever do that with the latest technology that makes sense. So as I said, you won't see us making some sort of crazy or trying to make some crazy recreational bike at the moment because battery density isn't there. But the move towards solid state's happening, greater capacity, greater functionality. And so yeah. So you will see more products, you will see more use cases, and I think us really pushing the boat when it comes to our kind of R&D and actually driving kind of progress in the space.
What I could see happening there is that you were picturing, I don't know, the PowerPoints or the decks that you've got that are marked strictly confidential of future product portfolios and thinking, how much can I say? But what's very evident is that the intention is to expand the portfolio when it makes sense, such that more and more people can enjoy the fun of two-wheeled electrification.
It is, and also actually, as well as kind of products, and talking about product pipelines is very easy, but I think the thing that trying to do just as hard is to invite more people into the motorcycling space. I think we're trying to overcome this idea that motorbikes are for men in leather jackets who like speed, and instead trying to work out how we can clearly communicate all the benefits that you and I have been talking about on this podcast, and make the tribe broader, and more inclusive. And I think that's really, I just think that's just as important.
And one thing that I should ask you, based on that, are you still offering the thing where you cover the cost of people's CBT training?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's our new rider program. Precisely for that reason. I mean, there aren't that many barriers, luckily, to getting on bikes, because they're low power. They only need the CBT, which takes like half a day to get, as you know. So the deal is that if you do get one of our bikes and you've just done your license, we will cover the cost of that to encourage people to get onto it. But look, I mean, even if you don't end up getting one of our bikes, I just encourage you to go and do your CBT and to spend some time on bikes, because, as I said, I just don't think you'll be going back.
Yeah. And you know what? I've done my CBT twice, which I'm sure many people say, why haven't you done your full license? That's illogical. But I was quite intimidated about going the first time. And it was just the most joyful day. You have an instructor who wants you to succeed and wants to share this world of biking with you. And actually, I think it's also made me a better car driver, because
Definitely.
I am aware of what it
Way
feels
more,
like.
Yeah. The way you don't just sort of, when you're on a bike, you don't just take kind of green lights as red and saw through them, without looking at the junctions. You're thinking a lot more about everything, and that contributes to that kind of meditative state that we talked about earlier, a lot more kind of focused. But no, definitely makes you a better driver.
Yeah.
And more conscientious of cyclists and bikers and kind of everyone else who's on the roads, pedestrians.
Yeah, I'm definitely much more patient, much more aware, and I then feel very smug in I'm an aware driver. Anyway, this has been absolutely wonderful. Thank you so much for giving up your time to come and chat with us. We will be watching the Maeving journey with an keen eye, because it's just so fantastic to see the growth that you've experienced over the past 4 or 5 years. It's amazing. So thank you so much.
It's an absolute pleasure, and absolutely love what you guys do as well in kind of driving the EV agenda and opening people's eyes up to all of the benefits and all the different kind of products that are out there. Weird and wonderful. So yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much to Seb for joining us for this episode of the Fully Charged Show podcast. I personally adored the fact that 65% of their bikes by volume are produced here in the UK, and the carbon emissions per mile, if you look at the overall carbon emissions that go into making that bike, are less than travelling on the London Underground. That is very, very compelling. But that's it. That's all that we have time for. Before you go, if you could do us the honour of giving us a like, a comment, a subscribe, or sharing with a friend, then we will love you forever. We cannot tell you how truly, truly valued it is. Thank you to Katie from our team, who'll be editing this particular episode. Thank you to you for listening. So if you have been, thank you for listening. We're really excited to partner with Duracell Energy to showcase their amazing renewable energy solutions. If you want to reduce your energy bills and join the renewable energy transition, installing home battery storage and solar panels at home is a great way to start. Duracell Energy's ecosystem of products typically partners with solar panels, but they can be just as effective without it, particularly for electric vehicle owners or anyone looking to take control of their energy. And with Duracell Energy's Platinum Homeowner offer, viewers can get a custom service that pairs you with top quality products and the best installers in your area. Your installation also comes with a 20-point check, a 6-month performance review, system health checks at 3 and 10-year periods, and outstanding local UK customer support every step of the way. Duracell Energy's batteries, inverters and EV chargers work together on one easy-to-use app. With features like dynamic tariff integration and grid services, you'll be able to maximise your return. Ready to get started? You can get your quote today. And don't forget, we're also giving away a Duracell Energy Bunny in every episode. Just answer the question about Fully Charged by following the link in the description. Good luck!